And the place that disproves them most is Papua New Guinea. In Papua New Guinea, we have an extraordinary language density, 820 to 850 endemic languages. What we find with these languages is that they are spoken between 5.5 million people. This is one of the greatest language densities in the world. In nearby Vanuatu, the Ni Vanuatu, or the people of Vanuatu, speak 115 languages among 110 people, 110,000 people, plus English, French, and an English-French Creole called Bishlama. Most people attribute this multilingualism to mountainous geography and isolation. But in fact, this is not the main cause, because in areas of the low-lying hills and in the plains, what we find is that there are more languages rather than fewer. So languages here are not a function just of isolation, they are a function also of identity and affiliation, as we have just so eloquently heard from Brazil. So what is it that they do in Papua New Guinea that actually mirrors what Siva does in the tourist spots of Upper Sri Lanka? What we find here is that preschool and early schooling is delivered in local languages. It mostly involves most children learning in only one language, that is their mother tongue, or two languages, two local tribal languages. Taken together, this constitutes mass multilingual education and indeed language rights, integrated with regional creoles, languages of wider communication, and English, which is the language of upper education. In the early 2000s, this meant that 380 languages were used in the first teaching programs. It's not impossible. In fact, it's administratively much easier than when they tried to teach everyone's initial literacy in English. It's steadily increasing. By 2004, an extra 90 languages were added, because if you localize administration and education to local areas, it's in fact an extension of what exists within the networks that communities already have. It requires occasional translation and bilingualism among key officers, and it results in an articulated scheme linking multilingualism and communication, efficiency and identity. The broad outcomes of this are already very positive. They involve greater attendance of children at school. The high attrition rates of the past have been lowered. Parents encourage children to go to school, and both of these things, if we look at the UNESCO statistics on school attendance and the Education for All aims, these are critical for lasting and effective literacy. Attending school and remaining there are what contribute positive attitudes to learning and higher rates of the acquisition of English among new learners in Papua New Guinea as a result. Very importantly, girls attend school longer and persist through their studies to a greater proportion than they used to in the past. Another example of this kind we can go back to Sri Lanka for. Education in Sri Lanka, one of the great language rights won through the 1950s and 60s, in a country greatly troubled by language politics, has been first language literacy rights. Sinhalese children are taught in Sinhala and learn Tamil and English. Tamil children are taught in Tamil and learn English and Sinhala. This results in much higher levels of school participation, higher rates of female attendance, and universal literacy. In fact, if we compare the literacy rates from UNESCO statistics for the South Asian countries, you'll see that Sri Lanka has a very proud achievement. Look at that, 95.1% of males are literate in Sri Lanka compared to 67.2% in Bangladesh. Compare the female rate of 96.1% in Sri Lanka to 60.3% in Bangladesh. The Gender Parity Index, the proportion of males to females, shows this very dramatically. More girls are more literate than boys in Sri Lanka. This is in a country that has endured a 25-year civil war and extraordinary impoverishment as a result of that war. But examples of inclusive and successful language policies, perhaps not as ambitious as we might want them to be, we can find in other parts of the world. In the United States, in the Philippines, in different and sometimes limited ways, as I will say. Each involves a progressive expansion of language rights and exposes the "it's impossible" ideology to scrutiny, and what it shows is that there are unjustified fears about citizenship, about administration, and about children's learning that are exposed by these examples. In the United States, the Native American Languages Act of 1990, emboldened in 2006, whose main declaration is, it is the policy of the United States to preserve, protect, and promote the rights and freedom of Native Americans to use, practice, and develop Native American languages, strengthened, as I said, in 2006. More impressive and less well known is the Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act of the Philippines of 1997. This isn't, in fact, a language policy, but it is a general policy on Indigenous rights which contains a language policy. And one of its principles is the requirement for development agencies to seek the approval of Indigenous peoples in their languages for development projects. Critics said this would slow up development and produce impoverishment. In fact, it has not done that, nor have language rights, wherever we have managed to secure them in Australia, done the same thing. Indigenous people typically are not anti-development, they just wish to control the pace of development. The Act in the Philippines stresses the use of Indigenous languages for education campaigns, public hearings, and contract signing purposes. More problematical, perhaps, are national languages of sovereign states. The object of multilingual language planning can also address the formerly colonised and marginalised national languages of now sovereign states. I'm referring to Ireland, where what was once impossible is now much less so. I've been working in Ireland for a couple of years, and I just want to show you some of the statistics on what's been happening there on the recovery of the Irish language, probably Europe's oldest continuous literate language. What we find from the statistics is a really high proportion of people actually learn Irish through the school system. As you can see, in 2006, 1.66 million people in the Republic of Ireland, 25,000 people in the northern part of, 75,000 people in the northern part of Ireland, and 25,000 people in the United States and Canada and other diaspora states claim to speak Irish. But actually, most of them never use it. Only 72,000 people actually use it. So education systems are only a small part of the recovery and retrieval of lost languages, even in independent, autonomous, sovereign states like Ireland. And the joke among language planners was, if you want to save your language and attain statehood at the same time, save your language first, because if you become an independent state, you'll neglect your language. And typically, Ireland proves that. But now they have a plan for massive recovery of Irish, and it is starting to show significant success. Just in the last 4 years, we have seen a huge growth of public and volunteer institutions for language promotion, the beginnings of an idea of a museum. I'm not sure if they know about Lingua Mon and the Portuguese one. Obligatory English medium and Irish medium schools, Irish broadcasting, radio, television, and great online work. The Official Languages Act, considerable literature, Irish in modern information technology platforms, 55 universities in the world teaching literature and language, and in 2007, the recognition by the European Union of the status of Irish as an official and working language of the EU. And our plan, our work there, is to increase the number of daily speakers of Irish to 250,000, something that looks possible on the early reading.